All right, so this was one of the questions that was asked by First Hour today in the help box. I just want to walk through this one. It comes from page 165. It is question number 11, and it gives this formula, and then it says find the period and the amplitude of the function. Now, I could do more than that. I could make a graph, but let's just suppose I'm trying to find the period and the amplitude. Well, the question becomes, when we kind of think about it, where would we find information regarding the amplitude? Amplitude. So amplitude to me, what does that mean? Well, it really means kind of like how high a wave goes, from that center line. It's that thing. And so I'm thinking amplitude. It's kind of like the only reason that would change is if the graph got stretched out this way. So it's like a vertical stretching factor. Or the only reason I could go higher, if I'm thinking about the Ferris wheel idea, the only reason I could get higher is if the radius changed. So whether you see it as like just the amplitude, or if you think about it as the radius change, or you think about it as a vertical stretch factor, you'll realize that this 1/2 is what's really controlling that amplitude. And so, if we think about a normal parent function, y equals cosine of x, we'll realize that really the amplitude, or that multiplier, that coefficient on cosine is really a 1 normally, which makes sense because that's why cosine typically goes up to 1 and down to -1. But if now we only took half of those values, we realize that we would only get up to 1/2 and down to -1/2. So my amplitude is really 1/2. Okay. The next part of the question said, what's the period? And so if we're thinking about period, it's like, how long does it take to make a complete cycle? How long does it take before the graph starts to repeat? So the only way I could change that is if I'm stretching or condensing it horizontally. And stretching and condensing, those are like multipliers to me, but I want to do it horizontally. So it's like, what's multiplying the x value that's inside of cosine? So what's multiplying the input? So really, if we kind of think about it, it's like, what is b there? What's multiplying the inputs? Like, what's changing the x values? What's a stretching and compressing on the x values? And so if we go back and think about this, there's so many different ways that we've discussed this. But I think about, like, maybe b is that speed factor, and 1 period really takes me, I gotta get 2 pi. So 2 pi is my angular distance to go a full cycle. And if my speed is b, then remember we saw that 2 pi over b would give us our period. Distance, angular distance divided by speed will give us time for a full cycle, or the duration for a full cycle. And so it's that b value that's really kind of condensing it. So the question is, when we go up into our function, y equals 1/2 cosine of 2x over 3, what the heck is that b value? What's being multiplied by x? And it looks weird because it's 2x over 3, so it almost looks like it's 2. 2 is being multiplied by x, but then we have this over 3. So the question becomes, can I write this so it looks like this? Something times x. 2x over 3 is something times x. And when we realize that, I'm going to come down here at the bottom, realize what we can write this function as 1/2 cosine of 2/3 x. And if you're not great with fraction work, think about it like this is like x over 1, and so 2 over 3 times x over 1 would be 2x over 3. You can think about it that way if that helps. And so then I realize that my b factor is 2/3. And so if I come over and I do that calculation, I have 2 pi over 2/3. And a lot of people don't like dividing by fractions, so a lot of you will actually say, well, I don't divide fractions well, but I could multiply by the reciprocal, or I could flip that fraction and multiply. But then it doesn't look, I'm not multiplying fractions, I'm multiplying a number and a fraction, and that looks problematic. But 2 pi is really 2 pi over 1. So now they have a similar structure. And then we would realize that it's really 6 pi over 2, which is really 3 pi. So that's my period. So hopefully this helps. When you look through, I know it's chaotic. I use lots of colors. I'm trying to organize it, but I don't always do the best job. But, anyway, hopefully this helps with this problem. Have a great weekend.